My name is Garrett, and I'm 29 years old. Growing up, my younger brother Mason was my best friend. That all changed 5 years ago when he betrayed me, destroying our business and our relationship in one calculated move. What hurt even more was watching my parents, Richard and Diane, stand firmly by his side despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Now, in the ultimate irony, Mason is desperately begging me to save our parents from financial ruin, a situation he created. Before I continue, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about family betrayal and redemption. Mason and I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood outside Boston. Just 2 years apart in age, we shared a bedroom until I was 14, building forts with blankets and staying up late trading baseball cards and secrets. On the surface, we were the perfect suburban family. Mom's homemade cookies after school, Dad coaching Little League, family vacations to Cape Cod every summer. But beneath that Norman Rockwell exterior, patterns were forming that would eventually tear us apart. From the beginning, our personalities were different. I was the planner, the responsible one who saved my allowance and turned in homework early. Mason was the charmer, with an easy smile and natural charisma that drew people to him like moths to flame. He could talk his way out of trouble before most kids his age could tie their shoes. Our parents called it the Mason magic. The first signs of trouble appeared when we were still young. I'd find my things in Mason's possession: action figures, video games, sports equipment, and when confronted, he'd either deny taking them or claim I had said he could borrow them. I hadn't. When I complained to our parents, the response was always the same. "Brothers share things, Garrett," my father would say. "Don't be so uptight." My mother was more direct in her favoritism. "Mason just forgets sometimes. He doesn't mean anything by it. He looks up to you so much." These small betrayals accumulated over the years. Mason would borrow $20 from my wallet. He'd break my things and deny responsibility. He'd promise to do his share of chores, then convince our parents I was being unreasonable when I complained about doing his work. Each time, the pattern repeated. Mason would do something wrong, I would point it out, and somehow I'd end up being the bad guy. "You're the older brother," my father would lecture. "You need to set an example of forgiveness." The pattern extended beyond our home. In high school, I maintained a 3.9 GPA while working weekends at a local hardware store. Mason barely passed classes but was popular and played varsity basketball. When I made honor roll, my parents would nod approvingly. When Mason scored 10 points in a game, they'd take the whole family out for ice cream. I watched my parents attend every one of Mason's basketball games while missing my debate team competitions because they had other commitments. When I won a partial scholarship to State University, my father's response was, "That's nice, but you'll still need loans." When Mason got accepted to the same school with much lower grades, they threw him a party and bought him a laptop. Despite this, I excelled in college. I worked 30 hours a week at the campus bookstore while maintaining my GPA. I met my best friend Trevor in our business program's sophomore year. We bonded over late-night study sessions and shared ambitions of starting our own company someday. Trevor came from a similar family dynamic and understood my frustrations in a way few others could. I also met Rachel during junior year in an economics class. She was brilliant, focused, and understood my drive. For the first time, I felt truly seen by someone. She didn't think I was too serious or too driven. She valued those qualities. "Your determination is what attracted me to you," she told me once. "You know what you want and you work for it. That's rare." Meanwhile, Mason's college experience was markedly different. He lasted 3 semesters before dropping out, claiming the professors didn't get his learning style, rather than requiring him to work or continue his education. Our parents funded what they called his finding himself phase. This involved several abandoned projects, a screenplay he never finished, A food truck business plan he abandoned after 2 weeks. A photography portfolio that consisted of exactly 8 pictures. Each time Mason moved on to his next passion, our parents would nod understandingly and open their wallets. "He's just trying to find his path," Mom would explain during our weekly phone calls. "Not everyone knows what they want right away like you did." By the time I graduated with my business degree, Mason had cycled through 3 more failed ventures and was living back at home. I had secured a marketing position at a mid-sized firm. But Trevor and I spent our evenings and weekends building our true dream, a web design company focusing on small businesses. We called it Pinnacle Designs. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Mason was finding himself, on our parents' dime, I was building something real, something lasting. Rachel supported me through the exhausting early days, bringing dinner to our makeshift office and offering encouragement when clients were scarce. "You're building something from nothing," she'd remind me. "That takes time. But you're doing it the right way." I thought I had escaped the toxic family dynamics by creating my own path. I was wrong. The patterns established in childhood were about to replay themselves in ways I couldn't have imagined, with stakes far higher than borrowed toys or shirked chores. When Trevor and I finally left our day jobs to run Pinnacle full-time, I felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything before. We had 15 regular clients, a small office downtown, and plans to hire our first employee. Rachel and I were discussing moving in together. For once, everything was going according to plan. Then came the call from Mason that would change everything. 3 years after college, Pinnacle Designs was gaining momentum. Trevor handled the technical side, building websites, managing servers, coding custom features, while I focused on client relations and business development. We just signed our biggest client yet, a regional chain of boutique clothing stores, and were looking to expand our team. My personal life was equally promising. Rachel and I had been together for nearly 4 years, and we'd started having serious conversations about our future. We'd browse real estate listings on Sunday mornings, pointing out features we liked in different homes. She'd playfully send me links to engagement rings with casual messages like, "Just FYI," or, "No pressure, just information." I was saving diligently for a ring, adding to the fund every month. I wanted to propose properly, with a ring she deserved and no debt to start our marriage. Rachel understood and appreciated my methodical approach to our future. "Most guys I dated before wanted everything right now," she told me one night as we walked home from dinner. "I love that you think about consequences and plan for the long term. It makes me feel secure." This stability made the call from Mason all the more disruptive. He was 25 then, still living with our parents and bouncing between jobs. He'd worked as a bartender, a cell phone salesman, and briefly as an assistant at a photography studio, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. According to our mother, he had accumulated significant credit card debt pursuing various opportunities that never materialized. When my phone rang that Sunday evening and I saw Mason's name, my first thought was that something had happened to our parents. He rarely called me directly. "Garrett, I need to talk to you," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Can we meet for coffee tomorrow?" The next day, Mason arrived at the coffee shop looking unusually professional in slacks and a button-down shirt. He outlined his situation with surprising candor. He was $30,000 in debt, had no job prospects, and our parents were finally cutting him off financially. "I've been thinking about what you and Trevor have built," he said, stirring his latte nervously. "I've always been good with people, you know that. I could help bring in new clients, manage accounts, that kind of thing." Warning bells rang in my head. Mason had never shown interest in our business before. In fact, he'd made comments suggesting he found our work boring compared to his creative pursuits. "This isn't just another whim, Garrett," he said, reading my expression. "I need something stable. And I want to learn from you. You've always been the successful one. The flattery was unexpected. Mason had never acknowledged my success before, always minimizing my achievements or suggesting I was just lucky, or had it easy. I don't know, Mason, I said carefully. We're just starting to grow. Taking on someone with no experience is risky. I'm your brother, he said simply, as if that answered everything. Against my better judgment, and Trevor's explicit concerns, I agreed to bring Mason in on a trial basis. We'd start him with basic client management tasks and see how he handled the responsibility. I convinced myself it was the right decision. Maybe this was Mason's chance to grow up, to find direction. Maybe our relationship could heal through professional collaboration. Trevor wasn't convinced. I trust your judgment, he said after Mason left our meeting. But be careful. People don't change overnight. The first few weeks actually went well. Mason arrived on time, dressed appropriately, and handled his limited responsibilities adequately. Clients seemed to like him. He had always been charming, and I began to hope my gamble would pay off. Then small issues started appearing. Mason began arriving late, first by 15 minutes, then 30. He'd blamed traffic or alarm malfunctions. He promised features to clients without consulting Trevor about technical feasibility. Expense reports for client lunches seemed excessive. With Mason claiming certain clients expected a particular level of treatment. When I confronted him about these issues, Mason's eyes welled up with tears. I'm trying so hard, he said. I thought you'd be proud of me, but you're just looking for reasons to criticize. Nothing I do is ever good enough for you. The familiar guilt washed over me. Was I being too harsh? Was I setting impossibly high standards because of our history? That weekend, our parents invited us for dinner. I hadn't mentioned the workplace issues to them, wanting to handle things professionally between Mason and me. But Mason had apparently given them his version of events. Garrett, your brother really looks up to you, my father said as he carved the roast. He tells us you've been pretty tough on him at work. I'm just holding him to the same standards as any employee, I explained. My mother shook her head. But he's not just any employee, he's your brother. He's trying to turn his life around, and he needs support, not criticism. You've always been hard on Mason, my father added. Maybe you're a little jealous of how easily he connects with people. The conversation felt surreal. I was giving Mason a chance that no other company would have given him. Yet somehow I was being portrayed as the villain. It was our childhood dynamic playing out in adult form. Later that night, Rachel listened as I vented my frustrations. You have two choices, she said finally. You can fire him and deal with the family fallout, or you can establish clearer boundaries and expectations. But Garrett, be careful. This isn't just about your relationship with Mason anymore. This is your livelihood. I chose the second option. The next day, I sat Mason down and clearly outlined our expectations: punctuality, transparency with clients, proper documentation of expenses. I created a structured training program and scheduled weekly review meetings. I was determined to make this work, to help Mason succeed while protecting the business Trevor and I had built. For a while, it seemed to help. Mason made efforts to improve, and I genuinely enjoyed some aspects of working with him. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of the brother I'd grown up with, the one I'd stayed up late talking with about our dreams. Those moments made me hope we could rebuild our relationship on new, healthier terms. I should have listened to Trevor. I should have trusted my instincts. Because the minor issues were just previews of what was to come. 6 months after Mason joined Pinnacle, our business was growing faster than ever. We'd hired 2 full-time employees, a designer named Lisa and a developer named Jordan. Our client list had doubled, and we'd moved to a larger office space. Trevor and I were finally taking home reasonable salaries after reinvesting most of our profits during the early years. My personal life was equally promising. Rachel and I had moved in together, and I was secretly planning to propose on our upcoming vacation to Maine. I'd finally saved enough for the ring she deserved, a vintage sapphire and diamond piece I'd found at an estate jeweler. It was tucked away in my desk drawer at work, where she wouldn't accidentally find it. Then Trevor called me into his office one Thursday afternoon, his expression unusually grave. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind me. "I've found some discrepancies in our accounts." Trevor showed me spreadsheets highlighting unusual patterns. Clients being invoiced for services we hadn't provided, payments being directed to accounts I didn't recognize. Company credit card charges for restaurants and hotels on days we hadn't had client meetings. "At first I thought it was accounting errors," Trevor explained. "But there's a pattern here, Garrett. Someone's systematically siphoning money from the company." My stomach dropped as the implications became clear. We spent the weekend investigating, pulling bank records and cross-referencing client contracts. The evidence was overwhelming and pointed directly at Mason. Over the past 4 months, he had embezzled nearly $75,000 through various schemes. He'd created fake invoices, diverted client payments, and used the company credit card for personal expenses. The amount was staggering for our small business, enough to potentially bankrupt us. The most painful discovery came when we tracked where the money had gone. Mason had purchased a collection of luxury watches, designer clothes, and a down payment on a sports car. Credit card statements showed weekend trips to New York and Chicago with his girlfriend Amanda. He'd even taken her to a Michelin-starred restaurant on the company card, charging a $1,000 dinner to a client account. All this while Rachel and I had been cooking at home to save money for our future. While Trevor had postponed his own vacation plans to reinvest in the business. While I had been defending Mason to Trevor, assuring him that my brother had changed. On Monday morning, we confronted Mason in the conference room, presenting him with the evidence we'd compiled. At first, he denied everything, his face a mask of indignation. "This is insane," he said. "I don't know what you're talking about." "We have the bank records, Mason," Trevor said quietly. "We have copies of the altered invoices. We have everything." Mason's expression shifted, the denial giving way to something colder, more calculated. "So what if I took a few perks? This company would be nothing without me. The clients love me, not you two nerds." "You stole $75,000. I said, my voice shaking. "You've put the entire company at risk." "Oh please," Mason scoffed. "You've always been jealous of me, Garrett. Always trying to make me look bad. Well, guess what? Our parents will never believe I did this. They know what you're like." With that, he stormed out, leaving Trevor and me staring at the evidence of his betrayal spread across the conference table. "We need to call the police," Trevor said. I hesitated, still processing the magnitude of what had happened. "Let me talk to my parents first. Maybe they can get him to return the money. If we press charges, the company's reputation could suffer. It was a mistake born of family loyalty that I would soon regret." That evening I drove to my parents' house, a folder of evidence in hand. When I arrived, Mason's car was already in the driveway. My heart sank as I realized he had beaten me there, no doubt with his own version of events. I found the three of them in the living room. Mason's eyes were red as if he'd been crying, and my mother had her arm around him protectively. My father stood by the fireplace, his expression dark. "How could you, Garrett?" my mother said before I could speak. "Your own brother? What has he told you?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "The truth," my father said. "That you're trying to frame him because you're jealous of his success with clients. That you've never wanted him to succeed." I opened my folder and laid out the evidence: bank statements, altered invoices, credit card receipts. He stole $75,000 from the company. He's been living a luxury lifestyle with money we worked for. My parents barely glanced at the documents. "These could be manipulated," my father said dismissively. Mason told us you're good with computers. Why would I sabotage my own company? I asked, incredulous. Maybe the business isn't doing as well as you claim. My mother suggested. Maybe this is your way of covering for your own failures. The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents demanded I fix the situation, without involving authorities. They suggested I was overreacting to borrowing between family members. They insisted Mason deserved an ownership stake in the company for his contributions. When I refused to back down, Mason launched into tears again. I knew you'd never accept me as an equal, he sobbed. You've always wanted me to fail. The surreal nature of the situation left me speechless. Here was my brother, caught red-handed stealing enough money to destroy the business I'd built, somehow positioning himself as the victim. And my parents were completely buying it. I left without resolution. Returning to the apartment, I shared with Rachel to find her packing an overnight bag. I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days, she said quietly. I'm not abandoning you, Garrett. But I need some space to process all this. Over the next week, the situation deteriorated further. Mason began a calculated smear campaign, contacting mutual friends with his version of events, that I was embezzling from the company and trying to frame him. He told extended family members that Trevor and I had mismanaged the business and were looking for a scapegoat. He posted vague but damaging insinuations on social media. Some people we'd known for years started avoiding me. I received concerned calls from relatives asking for my side of the story. Meanwhile, Trevor and I were scrambling to keep the business afloat, explaining the situation to our employees and reassuring clients. The final blow came when I discovered Mason had emptied a business account I didn't know he had access to, taking another $15,000. We had no choice but to involve our lawyer. In the end, Trevor and I made a difficult decision. To avoid bankruptcy, I would sell my share of the business to Trevor at a reduced rate, using the money to cover the losses Mason had caused. In exchange, Trevor would not press criminal charges against Mason. It was the only way to save the company and the jobs of our employees. The business I had built from nothing, the dream I had sacrificed for, was no longer mine. And my relationship with my family lay in ruins among the wreckage. The weeks following Mason's betrayal were some of the darkest of my life. I found myself at 24 starting over completely, no business, strained relationship with Rachel, and a family who had chosen my brother's lies over the truth. Before finalizing the sale of my share to Trevor, I made one last attempt at reconciliation with my parents. I drove to their house on a Sunday afternoon, hoping the evidence and time to reflect might have changed their perspective. I was wrong. We've been thinking about this whole situation, my father said as we sat stiffly in their living room. We think you share some responsibility here. Responsibility for Mason stealing from my company? I asked, incredulous. My mother nodded earnestly. You put too much temptation in front of him. You know how impulsive he can be. And making him work under you, when he's always felt overshadowed, what did you expect would happen? I expected basic honesty from my brother, I said. I expected support from my parents when he betrayed that trust. Family means forgiveness, Garrett, my father said sternly. Mason is sorry for what happened. He's agreed to pay back what he can over time. Now you need to move past this for the sake of this family. The conversation revealed nothing had changed, and perhaps never would. My parents were so committed to their image of Mason as the misunderstood golden child that they would twist reality itself to maintain it. I left that day knowing I needed complete separation to rebuild my life. The next week, I accepted a marketing position in Chicago, nearly 1,000 miles from Boston and the toxic family dynamics that had defined my life. The move wasn't easy. I found a small studio apartment I could barely afford on my new salary. I worked entry-level jobs despite my experience as a business owner. On weekends, I took freelance design projects to make ends meet. Depression crept in during those early months. along with crippling trust issues that affected every new relationship I tried to form. My parents sent holiday cards as if nothing had happened, never acknowledging the destruction their favoritism had caused. Their voicemails suggested I was holding grudges and tearing the family apart by maintaining distance. They invited me to family events without a hint of irony or understanding. Rachel and I had agreed to take a break during my transition to Chicago. The betrayal had affected me deeply, making me withdraw emotionally even from her. 6 months into my new life, she surprised me by showing up at my door. "I miss you," she said simply. "And I think you miss me too." Over the next week, we had difficult but necessary conversations about trust, family, and our future. Rachel had always been my anchor, the person who saw my worth when my family couldn't. Her presence in Chicago marked a turning point in my recovery. "I don't know if I can ever trust family again," I admitted one night. "Then we'll build our own family," she replied. "One based on mutual respect and support." Slowly, painfully, I rebuilt my life. After a year in Chicago, I received a promotion at the marketing firm. My freelance client base grew steadily. Rachel eventually relocated to join me, and we found an apartment together in a neighborhood we loved. I started therapy to process the family trauma I'd carried for years. Trevor remained a constant friend despite the distance, calling regularly with updates about the business and life back in Boston. Pinnacle Designs had not just survived but thrived after the crisis, growing to a team of 12 with an impressive client roster. "None of this would exist without your foundation," Trevor reminded me. "You deserve to know that your work mattered." My parents continued their occasional contact, sending birthday cards with checks I never cashed and leaving voicemails about family events I never attended. I maintained firm boundaries, responding with brief, civil messages while protecting my emotional health. In Chicago, I built a new support network. Colleagues became friends. Rachel and I found a community through volunteer work. For the first time, I experienced relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. 3 years after the move, Rachel and I were engaged and planning our wedding. I had been promoted to senior marketing director. We were saving for a house in the suburbs. The acute pain of betrayal had faded to a dull ache that only occasionally flared during holidays or family milestones. I thought I had finally escaped the toxic patterns of my past. Then Trevor called with news that would pull me back into the family drama I'd worked so hard to leave behind. Trevor's updates about hometown developments were usually casual: mutual friends getting married, business news, neighborhood changes. But his tone was different during a call in my 5th year in Chicago. "I thought you should know what's happening with your family," he said carefully. "It's not good, Garrett." According to Trevor's account, Mason had gone through a predictable cycle after the embezzlement scandal. There had been a brief period of apparent humility, where he'd worked retail jobs and lived quietly at our parents' house. This had lasted approximately 6 months before the old patterns reemerged. First came a short-lived career as a real estate agent, abandoned when Mason discovered the work required actual effort. Then a failed attempt at starting a social media marketing agency. Ironic given that he'd stolen from a legitimate marketing business. Each venture followed the same trajectory: initial enthusiasm, promises of imminent success, requests for investment. Then abandonment when reality didn't match Mason's fantasies. Through it all, our parents continued their enabling behavior. My father defended Mason to community members who knew about the embezzlement, insisting there had been misunderstandings, and that Mason had been taken advantage of by me and Trevor. My mother resumed her caretaker role, doing Mason's laundry and cooking his meals well into his 30s. Both parents continued providing financial support despite their own approaching retirement. "But the latest situation is different," Trevor explained. "Mason's convinced your parents to invest in a boutique fitness studio. We're talking serious money, Garrett. They've taken a second mortgage on their house." The house had been paid off years earlier, the culmination of my father's 30-year career as an insurance adjuster and my mother's part-time work as a school secretary. It represented their retirement security. How much are we talking about? I asked. From what I hear, at least $200,000, Trevor said. Second mortgage, plus their retirement savings. They're also co-signing business loans. The recklessness of the decision was staggering. My parents were in their 60s with modest pensions. The house was their most valuable asset. And they were risking everything on Mason's latest scheme, despite his consistent history of failure. Have they lost their minds? I asked. There's more, Trevor continued. Mason's girlfriend Amanda is getting concerned. She works in accounting, and she's been asking questions about the business plan. She called me last week wanting to know if I'd seen the projections Mason is showing your parents. Amanda's concern was telling. She had been with Mason for several years now, seemingly accepting his version of the embezzlement story and his portrayal of me as the villain. If she was questioning him now, the situation must be dire indeed. Over the next year, I received regular updates from Trevor about the fitness studio's progress. As expected, problems emerged immediately. Mason had chosen an overpriced location in a saturated market. The marketing was inconsistent and ineffective. Most damning, Mason's commitment wavered when the business required actual work rather than just planning and spending. He's at the golf course 3 afternoons a week, Trevor reported. Meanwhile, your parents are working at the front desk trying to keep the place running. 18 months after opening, the business predictably failed. My parents now face devastating consequences: foreclosure notices on their family home, depleted retirement accounts, and significant debt in their 60s. My father, never in robust health, developed heart problems that his doctor attributed partially to stress. Most surprising was the shift in dynamics between Mason and our parents. As financial reality set in, my parents began questioning the decisions that had led to their predicament. Mason, unable to accept responsibility as always, became defensive and distant. He's barely speaking to them, Trevor reported during one of our calls. He's blaming the failure on their interference in the business, saying they didn't let him run things his way. The irony was painful. After decades of unwavering support, Mason was abandoning our parents precisely when they needed him most, when facing the consequences of their devotion to him. I struggled with how to respond. Part of me felt a vindictive satisfaction. They were finally seeing Mason's true nature. But another part ached for my parents, now elderly and facing financial ruin. Despite everything, they were still my family. Rachel and I discussed the situation extensively. You don't owe them anything, she reminded me. They chose Mason repeatedly, even when it hurt you. They're adults who made their decisions. She was right, of course. But family complications are rarely solved by logic alone. I decided to maintain my distance but asked Trevor to keep me informed about developments. I wouldn't intervene, not yet, but I needed to know how bad things might get. The answer, it turned out, was much worse than I anticipated. And it would come in the form of an unexpected call from the last person I wanted to hear from. My life in Chicago had found a comfortable rhythm 5 years after leaving Boston. My position as marketing director provided stability and creative fulfillment. Rachel and I had gotten married in a small ceremony attended by her family and our Chicago friends. We were saving for a house in the suburbs, with plans to start a family in the next year or two. I still attended therapy monthly, processing the family trauma that had shaped me and working to ensure I wouldn't carry those patterns into my own future family. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone rang with Mason's number, a contact I hadn't deleted but had never expected to see again. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Then curiosity won out. Hello? I answered cautiously. Garrett, thank God. Mason's voice sounded different, desperate, strained. I need your help. It's about Mom and Dad. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. The house is going into foreclosure next month. He rushed on. Dad's heart condition is getting worse. The doctor says it's distress. They've got nothing left. Garrett. Nothing. And how exactly is this my problem? I asked, surprised by the coldness in my own voice. Look, I know we've had our differences. Differences? I interrupted. You stole from me, destroyed my business, turned our parents against me, and smeared my reputation. Those aren't differences, Mason. That's you systematically ruining my life. There was a pause before Mason continued, his tone shifting to one I recognized all too well, the voice he used when manipulating situations to his advantage. Mistakes were made on both sides. He said carefully. I took money I shouldn't have, yes. But you overreacted. You could have handled it within the family instead of involving lawyers. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, facing the consequences of his actions, Mason couldn't take full responsibility. What do you want, Mason? I asked directly. They need help, Garrett. Serious help. The bank wants $120,000 to stop the foreclosure. Their retirement is gone. Dad needs medical care they can't afford. And where are you in all this? It's your failed business that put them in this position. Another pause. I'm not in a position to help financially right now. Amanda left 6 months ago, took everything. I've got my own issues. Of course he did. Mason always had issues. That exempted him from responsibility. So you want me to clean up your mess? Again. I'm asking you to help our parents, he said, voice rising. Whatever issues you have with me, they don't deserve to lose everything at their age. Be the bigger person here, Garrett. The familiar manipulation tactic, appealing to my sense of duty while minimizing his responsibility, ignited a slow burn of anger. And if I help? I asked. What then? What's your plan for making this right? I'll figure something out, Mason said vaguely. I've got some opportunities lined up. Once I'm back on my feet, I'll pay you back, I swear. The same empty promises he'd been making his entire life. I need to think about this, I said finally. I'll call you back. After hanging up, I relayed the conversation to Rachel. Her expression darkened as I explained Mason's request. He hasn't changed at all, she observed. Still expecting others to bail him out with no real accountability. I spent the next 2 days in turmoil, discussing the situation with Rachel and my therapist. My concern wasn't for Mason. He would always land on his feet, finding new people to manipulate. But my parents were different. Despite their flaws and favoritism, they were aging and vulnerable. Could I live with myself if I left them homeless in their final years? Whatever you decide, Rachel said, it needs to come with boundaries. Real ones, not the kind they can ignore or manipulate around. After 48 hours of deliberation, I called Mason back. I've made my decision, I told him without preamble. Thank God, he breathed, relief evident in his voice. I knew you'd do the right thing. I can send you the bank details. I'm not giving you any money. I interrupted. What? But you said. I said I'd made a decision. And my decision is that I won't be sending you a dime. The silence on the other end was satisfying in a way I hadn't anticipated. You don't understand, Mason finally said, desperation creeping back into his voice. They're going to lose everything. Dad could. I understand perfectly. I cut in. You created this situation. You squandered their retirement. You put their house at risk. And now, as always, you expect someone else to fix it. This isn't about me, Mason shouted. This is about Mom and Dad. You're right about that much. I agreed. Which is why I'll speak to them directly about what help I'm willing to provide. Help that will have nothing to do with you. What does that mean? The wariness in his voice was new. It means if I help our parents, it will be with conditions. First, you won't be involved in any financial arrangements. Second, They'll need to acknowledge the patterns that got them here. And third, any help I provide will be structured to prevent this from happening again. You can't dictate terms to them. They're your parents. Yes, they are. And they chose you over me when you stole my livelihood. They chose you when you lied about me. They chose you every time, Mason. Now they can choose again, accept my help on my terms, or continue down the path they're on with you. Mason's voice turned cold. They'll never agree to that. They'll see it as you manipulating them. Then I guess we have nothing more to discuss. You self-righteous prick. Mason hissed. You've always thought you were better than everyone else. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing us suffer? No, Mason, I'm not. That's the difference between us. I take no pleasure in anyone's suffering, not even yours. But I won't enable destructive patterns anymore. Not for you, not for our parents, not for anyone. If Dad dies because of this, Mason began. If Dad dies, it will be because of decades of choices that neither of us made. Don't you dare put that on me. I ended the call. My hands shaking but my resolve firm. For the first time in our relationship, I had maintained my boundaries without guilt or manipulation swaying me. It felt like breaking free from a lifetime of invisible chains. The next step would be much harder, contacting my parents directly after years of minimal communication. But first, I needed to be absolutely clear about what I was willing to offer and what I would require in return. The old patterns had dominated our family for decades. Breaking them would require strength I wasn't sure any of us possessed. But for the first time, I was willing to find out. After my conversation with Mason, I waited 3 days before calling my parents. I wanted to approach them with clarity and calm, not the emotional turmoil Mason had stirred up. When I finally dialed their number, my mother answered on the second ring. Garrett? Her voice held surprise and something else. Hope, perhaps, or desperation. Is it really you? It's me, Mom, I confirmed. I think we need to talk. The conversation that followed was stilted at first, filled with awkward pauses and careful phrasing. I explained that Mason had contacted me about their financial situation. My mother's response was telling. He shouldn't have bothered you with our problems, she said, her voice small. We'll figure something out. Will you? I asked gently. Because from what I understand, you're about to lose your home. There was a long silence before she spoke again, her voice breaking. We made mistakes, Garrett. Terrible mistakes. I see that now. It was the first acknowledgement of error I'd ever heard from either of my parents. The admission cracked something open between us. I'd like to help, I said carefully. But things would need to be different. Over the next hour, I outlined what I was willing to offer: financial planning assistance rather than a blank check. Help finding affordable housing if they lost the house, even temporary lodging in Chicago if necessary. But my conditions were non-negotiable. Mason could not be involved in any financial arrangements, and they would need to acknowledge and address the patterns that had led to this situation. I don't know if your father will agree to those terms, my mother said honestly. He still believes Mason just needs one more chance. Then I can't help, I replied. I won't fund another cycle of the same destructive patterns. When I hung up, I felt both drained and relieved. The ball was in their court now. I had offered what I could while protecting my own boundaries. For 2 weeks I heard nothing. Then came an unexpected email from Amanda, Mason's ex-girlfriend. She had reached out to Trevor for my contact information, feeling I deserved to know the full picture. I left Mason when I discovered he was diverting money from the fitness studio to personal expenses, she wrote. History repeating itself, I guess. I tried to warn your parents, but they didn't want to hear it. I'm sorry I believed his version of events for so long. Her outside perspective confirmed what I'd long suspected. Nothing had changed with Mason. He remained the same manipulative person who had betrayed me years earlier. A week later, my father suffered a mild heart attack. My mother called from the hospital, her voice shaking as she asked if my offer still stood. The health scare had finally forced them to confront reality. Yes, it does, I assured her. But the conditions remain the same. We understand, she said quietly. We're ready to listen now. I flew to Boston the following weekend, meeting my parents in my father's hospital room. The conversation was difficult but necessary. For the first time, they truly listened as I described the patterns of favoritism and enabling that had shaped our family dynamics. My father, weakened by his health scare but still stubborn, initially resisted my characterization. We always loved you both equally, he insisted. That may be true, I acknowledged. But you didn't treat us equally. And the difference shaped both our lives. Gradually, as we talked through specific incidents from childhood through the business betrayal, something shifted in my father's expression. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was the beginning of recognition. I never thought of it that way, he admitted. We were just trying to help Mason because things seemed to come harder for him. By making excuses for him, you taught him he didn't have to be responsible for his actions, I explained. That's not help, it's harm. My mother, more emotionally intuitive, grasped the dynamics more quickly. We failed you both, she said, tears streaming down her face. We failed Mason by not requiring more from him. And we failed you by not seeing how our actions hurt you. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. Decades of patterns couldn't be undone in a single conversation. But it was a start. Over the next month, we developed a plan. My parents would sell their house, using the limited equity to purchase a small condo outright. I would help structure their finances to stretch their remaining resources. Supplemented by part-time work my father could manage despite his health issues. Most importantly, they agreed to attend family therapy to address the enabling patterns that had led to this crisis. Mason's reaction to these developments was predictable. When he learned I was helping our parents but excluding him from financial arrangements, he alternated between rage and manipulation. He created health scares, made suicide threats, and enlisted relatives to plead his case. Each attempt was met with the same response. Help was available for him too, but only with accountability and professional support. He'll never change, will he? My mother asked sadly after Mason had stormed out of a particularly difficult family therapy session. I don't know, I answered honestly. Change is possible for anyone, but it requires acknowledging the need for it. Mason hasn't reached that point yet. Rachel joined me for my third visit to Boston, meeting my parents for the first time since our wedding. The interaction was awkward but cordial, with my parents making genuine efforts to connect with the woman who had stood by me through everything. Thank you for loving our son when we failed him, my mother told Rachel during a private moment. I didn't love him despite his family history, Rachel replied kindly but firmly. I loved him because of who he became despite it. As months passed, a new family dynamic slowly emerged. My parents moved into their condo, beginning the process of rebuilding their financial security with my guidance. Our relationship remained fragile but improving, with boundaries I enforced consistently. Mason drifted in and out of contact, still unable to accept the new reality where his manipulation tactics no longer worked. Amanda contacted me occasionally with updates about Mason's life, a courtesy I appreciated but didn't seek out. According to her, he had found a new girlfriend who seemed unaware of his history, and was working at a friend's restaurant while talking about yet another business venture. Some patterns never change, but my response to them had. In Chicago, Rachel and I finally purchased our first home, a modest 3-bedroom in a family-friendly suburb. We began discussing having children, conversations that inevitably led to reflections on family patterns and how to break them. I'm terrified of becoming my parents, I admitted one night. Of unconsciously favoring one child over another. The fact that you're aware of that possibility already puts you ahead, Rachel pointed out. We'll watch for those patterns together. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve. They visited Chicago for the first time, staying in a hotel rather than with us, a boundary they respected without complaint. We had dinner together, sharing cautious conversations about the future rather than rehashing past hurts. "We're proud of you, Garrett," my father said during that visit. "I know we didn't say that enough before. But we are." The words I'd waited decades to hear felt bittersweet now. I appreciated them while recognizing they couldn't undo the past. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a single moment but a process. Some days I feel genuine compassion for my parents and even Mason, understanding how family patterns shaped all of us. Other days, the old hurt resurfaces, and I need to process those feelings all over again. What's different now is that I can forgive without abandoning my boundaries. I can love my family while protecting myself from harmful dynamics. I can hope for Mason's eventual growth while recognizing it may never come. True forgiveness, I've discovered, isn't about forgetting or excusing. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment, while maintaining the wisdom that comes from experience. It's about breaking generational patterns so they don't continue into the future. As Rachel and I prepare for the next chapter of our lives, I carry these lessons with me. Family isn't just about blood ties but about mutual respect and support. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is establishing boundaries that allow everyone the opportunity to grow. If you've stayed with me through this story, perhaps you've recognized elements of your own family dynamics. Maybe you're the scapegoat, like I was, or perhaps you're the favored child, like Mason, facing the consequences of enabling. Whatever your situation, know that patterns can be broken. Healing is possible. And you deserve relationships built on mutual respect rather than manipulation or obligation. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you experienced similar family dynamics? How did you handle them? Don't forget to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you. And share it with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their family struggles. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately bring the most peace.